what I want to go over in this video are the reasons as to why modern minimalism sucks, and specifically I want to go over what I think is a better form of minimalism. There are two reasons I will go over in this video as to why minimalism exists. One is the political climate of the world, obviously, because it's an evolving thing, so you can tie it back to the beginning of time that humans have existed. But specifically, the last 150 years, the ideologies of that and how they influenced modern minimalism, and in my opinion, they and their pseudoscientists hijacked what minimalism could be. The other main reason is more of the why now and why not prior to now. Because minimalism is kind of a new thing. I mean, it existed in the sense that, monks have practiced it, but the idea of people practicing it for non-religious purposes is quite new. I think minimalism has a darker purpose and backbone. That being that we have kind of a societal depression. I think it's come from the last probably century and a half or so, maybe more like 2 centuries and a half. And it came from and comes from a lack of meaningful work for most people, a phenomenally destructive diet to human psyche and the physical body of a human, and also a lack of commonality amongst neighbors. The way I kind of see it is you have philosophical minimalism, which in my mind would just be minimalism, and then underneath it there are probably more than just 2, but there are 2 major ones that exist now, and that's material minimalism and inaction minimalism. And I think a combination of both is great, and Stoicism is a combination of both for the most part. I would also say that many people who practice one typically might try to practice another one at some point in time. Modern philosophers are exactly the same as they've always been. People would say that they are worse. I disagree. I think that philosophers have always been terrible. I think that there possibly haven't ever been any true philosophers, and of the philosophers that have existed, only for short parts of their life were they philosophers. The rest of the time they were just faking it. The issue comes from having a structure, okay? A philosopher that I liked to watch on YouTube a long while back was Stefan Molyneux. I kind of was pushed away from his ideology as I find that he became more focused on politics, which is fine, politics exists, but he got so focused, in fact, on it that he started to stop philosophizing and started to just assume that what people who agreed with him have said is true. And that's the issue that all philosophers fall into. So, I absolutely think it's still fine to watch his videos, even though he doesn't really know what a valid argument is. He is by far not the worst YouTuber you could watch on YouTube. I think, honestly, he might be one of the best, because a lot of the philosophy YouTubers are pretty shitty, such as PhilosophyTube. The issue with philosophy and philosophers is that to be a true philosopher, one must philosophize from nothing. Many philosophers will try to validate their backbone, if that makes sense, rather than thinking and philosophizing from the world up, which honestly you couldn't possibly do. You can't rationally deduce the world. It's simply impossible, but instead of trying to, or at least trying to do that with every bit of your philosophy, many philosophers just take the lazy way out, and they assume that their niche, their ideological group is correct, and then they start to try to validate it, and they try to find other things which validate it. Again, this is by no means bad, but in my mind, to be a philosopher, you have to be trying to find truth. This is very potent at forcing people to stay within certain ideological lines. For example, if you're a Marxist, which I don't think anyone who isn't basically autistic is a Marxist anymore, then you likely have encountered a certain conundrum, or at least most Marxists I find do. And that's that everyone that they are a friend of is also a Marxist. And then what happens is, say one of them wants to think rationally and thus leave Marxism, it is quite hard when everyone you know also believes in it. If you were to do that, you might be, removed. The idea of being in a group and the benefits and negatives of it are really not something that I could say is good or bad, but it exists. An ex of mine and I were watching a documentary or two about minimalism a long while back, probably 2 years ago. And in it, during it, she said something along the lines of, it's weird that you like the idea of minimalism because you're a capitalist, and capitalism and minimalism just don't work together. Other than the fact that I had never heard someone say something so blatantly dumb in my entire life, I noticed that she was right in the sense that she was wrong. From her very Marxist view of the world, she extrapolated and came to the conclusion that materialism and minimalism are different, and she assumes that capitalism is materialism. Every assumption made there is wrong. First off, materialism and capitalism are not the same thing. You can have capitalism without materialism, and materialism and minimalism are not opposites. She would believe she was right, and most Marxists, or people who had a backbone of Marxist philosophy within them, would also think that that was a valid judgment of the world. They believe that capitalism and materialism are the same. And it is from pseudo-intellectuals who have that backbone that I think materialism and minimalism have been hijacked. Materialism doesn't really exist. No one is a materialist besides a very, very small minority of people. Because those people had that view, they took it and they viewed that something that was anti-materialistic would be just ideal. If everyone were just not materialistic, they would eradicate the capitalist influence in them and become socialist ideal men. I think that every ideology has some truth in it. Specifically, I think they were onto something, and that thing was that people are unhappy. I said that, diet and a lack of good work and a lack of drive that is common amongst neighbors is what's causing a societal depression. They would probably disagree with a few of those things, but let me go over them. Modern nutrition has been hijacked by vegans and vegetarians for quite a long time, and those people used their power and their position of authority to make people think that eating vegan and vegetarian is just the most healthy option in the world. In all actuality, it's not. Many diets that exist are fad diets. For example, the paleo diet is a fad diet, and you shouldn't probably eat it. But it was onto something. I actually have a bit of a history with this in the sense that I was on keto for about half a year or so, and then I just tried to work a lot extra for the other half, and in about a year I lost around 100 pounds. The reason for this is that a high-fat diet is the way that early humans evolved to exist. While modern nutritionists will probably argue otherwise and say, well, no, look, because this has, a higher rate of heart disease, the issue is that they're rarely ever actually testing a Paleolithic diet. Not the paleo diet, but an actual Paleolithic diet. Usually what they do is they assume that we should eat a lot of carbs, and then they say a high-fat diet on top of carbs. In all actuality, what a keto diet isn't a high-fat diet, and it's kind of a misrepresentation to call it such. It's really a low-carb diet. And, most keto YouTubers probably already know this and talk about that. High-fat diet is natural, high-carb diet is unnatural, but the human brain is capable of running on both. But because, the vegans and vegetarians have hijacked nutrition, they've slowly made it so that fat was scary and people thought it was scary. And only recently has it really had a resurgence and people realized that nutritionists are wrong. I just edited this entire thing and I apologize as to how I tried to get probably 3 lines of reasoning into one coherent argument. It didn't go so well because I'm not good at doing that. But I hope you enjoyed watching this, and if you did, I guess click the like button. And if you think I'm a complete and utter idiot, make sure to hit that dislike button and tell me why in the comments. But thanks for watching.